I see several deals a day. So over the course of a year, I see a few thousand deals. But the lens with which I look at deals is first and foremost, is this something that I love, I'm passionate about, I believe in, I would, subscribe to, I would download, I would drink it, eat it, right? Whatever the case may be. And if that's not there for me, it's an easy no.
Folks, welcome back to another episode of What's Next. For all you high-performing athletes, high achievers, you are going to want to dial in. I'm serious that you may want to pull the car over or just stop your walk if that's what you're on. You're going to want to hear what's going on. I'll also say my next guest is not the first set of twins we've had on, which is pretty cool. First set of identical twins. We had his brother Brett on a little earlier. My twin boys, Josh and Owen, were on, I think, episode 3 or 4. So you're going to get this cool dynamic to hear how that works together. But as a short intro, we've got a guy who grew up in an entrepreneurial world, went to Brown, Harvard, NYU, part of YPO, worked in the PE and VC realm out of school, took the wild leap with his twin brother to start a firm called Benevolent Capital, has taken that, then invested in very household names that we know in this industry, like Aura, Athletic Brewing, now a company, Flyhouse. By the way, a professional football team in England that just was promoted last season called Ipswich. Also a couple of USL championship teams in Phoenix Rising and Rhode Island FC, where they're also opening up, I think, in about 3 weeks, their brand new stadium, which these guys helped orchestrate and implement. So without any further ado, there is just so much wisdom coming. I know it's going to happen. But Grant Johnson, thanks for joining us, man. I really appreciate you being on the show.
Yes, thanks, Bryan. Pleasure.
Okay, so I kind of alluded to this, but the old adage, don't go into business with friends or family. You seem to have done both in one fell swoop. And if I'm not mistaken, your dad, through a company called Targus back in the day, I mean, there seems to be this inner working that has always happened. And then you and Brett obviously running Benevolent with, roughly about 800 limited partners in tow. How has that been? Do you guys bust the myth that don't go work with friends and family?
Yeah, I think we do. I mean, for starters, we're fortunate that as identical twins, as you mentioned, we went to grade school together, we went to boarding school together, we went to college together. So we actually view that working together actually makes us better. We kind of view ourselves as complementary and additive. And at the same time, though, I run what would be the venture capital and private equity side of the Benevolent Capital house. So I'm responsible for Aura Ring and Athletic Brewing and Flyhouse. And then Brett, we say his sandbox is the professional sports portfolio and then the real estate, the stadium around it. So, he drives that bus. I help where possible, but that helps a lot where we're, each have our own kind of domain, if that makes sense. At the same time,
does.
I would also say, as identical twins, interesting enough, characteristic-wise or personality-wise, I'm actually so much more like our father, and Brett is so much more like our mom. So even though we're identical, the traits that we possess are again more like our parents, which is probably another reason that we work really well together. Quite honestly, I tried working with and for my father. And that didn't work out so well. And really, probably because I'm so much like my dad, where Brett worked really well with our father for a long time. Our father was chairman and CEO of that company, Targus, and Brett was president of it. So there's the other side of the coin for you.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because what I think, whether somebody's a twin, brother and brother team, I'm in business with my younger brother, Matt. And even then there's this learning curve of what you said is really, what are our superpowers that we bring? And also to make sure that we're not stepping on each other. But I think even if you go to hiring somebody or joining as a partner or doing it with a friend, oftentimes we're attracted to people who are similar to us. And much like you said about you and your dad, where you can see a little bit of oil and oil or oil and water not mixing together. I think people are attracted when they go into business with friends, we're buddies. We do everything together. We think alike. That may not be the best for business. So I appreciate you bringing that up, that kind of knowing the differences and filling those gaps certainly seems like it's working for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think, using a sports comparison, everybody needs to have their, unique ability, their position, so to speak. I'm a former rower in high school and college, right? And one of the expressions in rowing is you can't stroke the boat from the bow, right? Everybody has a different seat in the boat. You all need to be rowing together and in the same direction, but you all can't stroke the boat, so to speak, right? Everybody needs to
Yep.
know what role they're playing.
And so I think this is a perfect transition then. So if we think about a role, most of our audience, as you and I talked offline, current or ex-pro athletes, or maybe high performers, worked in the VC PE world for maybe a bigger firm. They want to go out and do what you and Brett have done. We're going to go do something on our own or be a part of something that's ours. I certainly want to leverage all the things I learned on the field or in the boat. But oftentimes there's this stumble. So when you look at it, and you've got an incredible list of partners, limited partners who have come with you on those different investments, where have you seen the guys and gals take what they did great on a field, or maybe even in your personal experience, and transition it over, or where do they muck it up? Because I think either one of those would be great learnings for our audience.
Yeah, I mean, I think for starters, the advantages that athletes have, they need to play to those same strengths. That what made them successful as an athlete hopefully can help make them successful in their next, focus on investing and whatever. And what I would start with is the discipline that they bring to any endeavor, right? First of all, be a student of the game, so to speak. And, one of the things my brother and I, we're constantly going to learning events, whether it's through YPO or Dan Sullivan's Strategic Coach. But same thing for an athlete, just because you made a lot of money, perhaps, or perhaps not, depending, and you had that success, taking that and putting it into this new area, like learn as much as possible, study everything, ask questions, hopefully approach things with a certain sense of humility and openness. Not like, as the saying goes, if you're spending most of your time talking as opposed to listening, you're not really learning anything, right? So I think the same thing. The other thing I also would say, similar to why they resonated or gravitated to whatever sport that they found success in, same thing, like gravitate towards those areas of investment that resonate with and for you. Don't get interested in something because somebody else tells you. Get interested because you actually enjoy that area, whatever it might be, right? Or a ring. Hopefully it's because you use Aura Ring, you love Aura Ring, right? And that's how we approach our portfolio and our investors, whether they're athletes or not athletes. Hey, first and foremost, do you love it? Do you use it? Do you believe in it? Are you an evangelist for it, right? And if none of those things are there, I actually say to our investors all the time, like, no worries, pass. It's all good.
That's such great insight. I'm going to hit the pause button. As our audience knows, I'm a huge note taker. I'm also a goalkeeper, so I need to say it back. I got a very short-term memory. Be a student of the game. And honestly, that should not feel foreign if you're coming off of a team or field, right? You do your scout, or you do your pre-work, or you do whatever video review. We're always doing that as athletes. Don't change that, right? Grant's giving you it's like an obvious tip here. Don't change it. Take it with you. It's probably one of your superpowers. You're able to look at that video, read that playbook, and understand what's going to happen somewhat predictively. And you're absolutely right. It goes there. I use the term, have your feet follow your money. I love the way you're saying it. Basically, have that investment resonate with you, have it be part of your passion, if you will. And if it doesn't, and you and I have both cited many that it didn't, and it probably didn't turn out that great, but the ones that did, you kind of tilt the scales in your favor. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because oftentimes, and it's kind of my segue into the next question, we do see athletes, the big 30 for 30 episodes of guys made millions and now they're bankrupt. Most of those came from the opposite of that thinking, which is they put money in restaurants, nightclubs, whatever those things were that they had no interest in, didn't really care about, heard it from a friend, did probably little to no due diligence. You guys at Benevolent do something which I think is just extraordinary. Not only your investment platform, so having multiple limited partners, they can get in or out of any deal. You've broken it down literally down to if you want to come in $5,000 or $50,000 increments, anything in between, and obviously above. Amazing. You don't even take a management fee until they've doubled their investment, and then you share in the upside after that. So when you think about all the things that you guys do and these nightmare stories we hear of others, how do those guys leverage those superpowers you're talking about, like being a student, having that investment resonate for them, but they're still getting all these other things thrown at them? How do they start to create a filter around, like, hold on a second, let me either tap into guys like you, or where else can I find information that might help me just slow down enough to kind of make the right decision?
Yeah. So for starters, I would advise getting into the habit of saying no, right?
Mm.
And look, that's the same when they talk about time management, right? And when somebody wants to take your time, really get in the habit of being really judicious and diligent about what you agree to. And so, as I think I shared with you, I see several deals a day. So over the course of a year, I see a few thousand deals. But the lens with which I look at deals is first and foremost, is this something that I love, I'm passionate about, I believe in, I would, subscribe to, I would download, I would drink it, eat it, right? Whatever the case may be. And if that's not there for me, it's an easy no. And that's why we only do a few deals like that a year, is because that's the filter that I use to say no. And I, all the time I say, hey, just to make you aware, I wouldn't, one of our big areas of investment is not the non-alcoholic world, right? So we're big investors in Athletic Brewing, Investe Brewing, and another one called Le Petit Beret. So I will not invest in an alcoholic brand because I don't drink alcohol. So it's an easy no. Like, hey, this is a pass for us because I can't get behind it. And if I can't get behind it, that's the end of it. And then I would say how we structure, to your point about, like, we're willing to accept, $5,000 investments up to, $5 million investments, and we don't charge any management fees, and the investors have to get the first double. If the investors don't double their money, we don't make a nickel, but anything above that. And all of those thoughts go to our name, Benevolent Capital, right? Meaning to do well, win-win, the proverbial golden rule. I mean, one of the things we talk about is, like, what would we look for if we were on the other side of the table? And, one of the things talking about, like, when I get shown various deals or when I'm looking at them and I see that they have a really high minimum hurdle to get into it, right? $1 million. I'm like, that's ridiculous, right? I wouldn't really want to be involved with that type of mindset. The other thing is when you see these things that you might be investing with these major upfront fees, right? Same thing. Like, wait a second, why, right? Why are they charging so much? Why do they have to charge so much? And they're let's be honest, they're at cross purposes with returns and trying to perform. So I would say, from an athlete perspective, the other thing is the overall, follow your heart and your gut, right? If something doesn't sound right, if it doesn't smell right, if it doesn't feel right, listen to that.
What I loved about what you said was creating this sort of win-win scenario. And obviously you guys do that at Benevolent. As a side note, very cool name, and not many people live their ethos behind a company name. And I won't insert the 50 that I can think about right now. But when you do think about sort of the name and driving force of the company and the really do good win-win side of it, you guys live that out. I've had the chance to meet a few people in the sort of inside workings of the group, and everybody speaks so highly of that. So again, I think, folks, if you're taking something away, is find others that are on this path, seek out win-win, definitely be a student of that, right? Grant's pretty clear about where to go, or at least where to start looking for those things. So Grant, as you've seen other, I won't just say athletes, but let's say, I'm sure of the LPs, there's a lot of high performers in that group, people seeking other investments, finding something that resonates both for you guys and for them. How do they get focused on one of these ideas where, okay, it resonates with me, I get it, I like it, and maybe I am an athlete and I bring some name equity to this? Is that like, Is that something that does help in some investments where you've seen of so-and-so comes in and because they're using a private jet all the time, getting connected with Flyhouse matters? Or is it just about writing a check or something in between?
No, that's for sure, especially with Flyhouse, right? So, real quickly, it's essentially the Uber for private jets. So, within minutes of downloading the app on your phone and putting in that you want to go from, New York to Miami, it'll serve you up private jet quotes at the lowest prices possible. Literally, that they bid against each other. That's an example of where, yeah, for athletes that know that space, travel within that space. There's something very complementary and additive to that. I mean, as an example, Flyhouse has, the golfer Justin Rose as a brand ambassador right now. They're talking to a handful of NBA players, soccer, Formula One, you name it. It's a big part of the brand for sure. But in the meantime, I would also say that we have investors that, same as I described to you, they're big users and evangelists of Aura Ring, or they're, big believers in athletic brewing as an example. Now, maybe they don't have a deal per se with the company, but they're, they love the brand and they're happy to promote it on their own merits. I think that goes to what we were describing in that, whatever you're going to be investing in, you're going to be spending a lot of time with it. So hopefully it is, I describe the benevolent portfolio. Like, I get up in the morning thinking about the benevolent portfolio, and I go to bed at night thinking about the portfolio. And I mean that in a good way, like, because I love the portfolio and I love what we're involved with, invested in. And so the same thing from an investor perspective, especially from an athlete. Like, look, you spent all those amazing years and discipline of early mornings, late nights, all that stuff, right? But it started ways because you loved it and you had some talent in it, right? By the way, I don't know if I shared the story with you because I think it's important, but the first firm I worked for out of college was a firm in San Francisco called Montgomery Securities, which was a pretty legendary Wall Street firm. But
no doubt,
the founder, Tom Weisel, literally put an ad out in the Wall Street Journal saying, "Are you a, world-class or collegiate level athlete interested in the securities industry?" And the whole point of that was he realized, especially working stock market on the West Coast, you had to be at your desk by like 4:30 in the morning. And he knew athletes were the types that they're used to that, right? And it was brilliant. And the same thing, like, to your audience that are trying to figure out, apply those same strengths and disciplines and backgrounds into this world of making investments. And then, keeping that thread going, as we discussed, who, not how, right? Dan Sullivan, the same book. And whatever you do, it's all about the who's. And you better get along with them. And also, by the way, hopefully they have a track record of success. And also, it's not, the other idea, it's not that they don't lose, right? But how do they handle when they lose? And what do they learn from it, right? It's okay to lose, right? Like, actually, you need to worry about somebody that kind of tells you that they don't lose, right? They don't lose money. They haven't had a bad deal. They haven't had a bad, right? Exactly. I guess,
right now.
Run, right? Like, exactly. They're lying. It's total nonsense. No, you want to say, hey, what did you do in that situation? What did you learn from that situation? And if they don't give you, hopefully, a very candid, vulnerable answer, then your radar should probably be going off. Like, geez, are they, they snowballing me a little bit? Like, they're just giving me what they think I want to hear.
Well, I mean, you guys have a lot more zeros in volume, both investment and just the throughput of deals that you see and that you execute, than certainly we do at Opportunity Seed. But if someone doesn't ask me when we're looking at putting together another LP for, we've got Galway Bay Golf Clothing Company. If someone wasn't asking me, where's it gone wrong for you? I mean, I made an investment with a guy who was doing a startup for athletes in X Games that was his background was as a Nike CMO. So, like, it had all the right things. We just didn't have the right structure. It failed miserably. And in hindsight, you go, oh, I know exactly why. I'm not afraid to tell that story. And I've got a significant investment that was in a dumpster on fire, but I learned from it. And I know we're at Galway Bay better because of it. I want people to ask those. And if they don't, I'm also like, for future reference, you should be asking anybody you're willing to invest with of where it didn't go well. Because if, to your point, if they say I'm batting 1,000, I'd be like, not a chance,
Yeah.
mathematically, unless you've only done one deal and it was yours. It's just mathematically not a chance. So I think that's a great tip. Ask that question. And going half a step backwards, kind of one of the notes I wrote was, even if as an athlete with a persona, with followers, with whatever, if you cannot leverage that into, let's say, more equity because of what you're going to do, you certainly can do it as just being a great advocate for the company, because, by the way, as it grows, you do better anyway. I think about our friends out of Michigan, State and Liberty, the clothing company, originally built for hockey players who disproportionately have oversized legs and, maybe body structure just a little different, built really nice, flexible clothing for them, suits, just really sharp looking clothes. And all the guys who ended up investing in their company, for the most part, were ex-athletes who were wearing their clothes, who loved their stuff. It wasn't that
Yeah.
hard, right? And I don't mean to minimize it for our guys at State and Liberty. It was probably really hard, but they had advocates built in. And so when you see these guys posting and scrolling and looking awesome, it's actually what was really happening. So I love you bringing that up. I'm sort of transitioning now through, okay, we've got some filters for doing that. We can figure out a way to be an awesome advocate for it. If I'm then stepping down a little further and said, hey, look, I want to kind of go on this journey and I want to do my investing playbook. I don't want to build a benevolent or an opportunity seed, but I want to invest. Can you think of a couple of, 1, 2, 3 concepts where guys or gals, where they're just looking to deploy some capital, not typically found like I can go give it to Goldman or whoever in the market, but then I have these sort of off-book investments, much like you guys have done in Athletic Brewing and Aura and Flyhouse. Where do I start building that playbook of, okay, this is what I'm looking for. Here's where I get connected. Where do I start looking? Any and all of that information I think would be super helpful.
Yeah, I mean, for starters, it's all about that network, right? The relationships, the who, not how, putting the feelers out. But as part of putting the feelers out, try to be specific. And what I mean is saying, "Hey, I got money to put to work, and I'm interested in investments." Like, that's too vague and ambiguous, and you're probably going to get steamrolled because you really don't know what you're interested in. So, I think one, I'm not a financial advisor, but I do believe that, for anybody's portfolio, they should have a combination of, liquidity, security, and then speculative elements, right? I mean, and it depends on how old you are, it depends on how much money you have, right? But there certainly should be a percentage, and a smaller percentage, that's earmarked towards more speculative, higher risk, venture oriented, earlier stage investments, right? This kind of stuff that I work on. But at the same time, the other dynamic here, and this is really important, is only invest what you're, really truly can afford to lose. And if it's if it's any number that keeps you up at night, then obviously it's too much. And,
Yep.
and again, another way to look at things is, okay, what's the worst that could happen? Well, assume that the worst that could happen is you're going to lose this investment, right? There you go. There's it. The worst that could happen is you're going to lose this investment. Can you live with that? If your answer is no, then it's either a pass or cut back dramatically on that, potential investment amount. And then, as I keep emphasizing, the who's are really important here. Don't just do it because it's your buddy. Don't just do it because your buddy's investing. Do it because it's right for you and it resonates with you. And the other thing is, oftentimes the best potential sounding boards in a situation is somebody's significant other or partner, right? Because they'll look at it from a different lens, right? And I do think there's a lot of merit to that. Like when potential investors talk to me like, well, I need to talk to my wife about it. Like, absolutely. Please talk to your wife about it. And I'm happy to talk with your wife about it. Right.
For sure.
You want that, hopefully, buy-in and synchronicity. And if it's not there, same thing. Probably a sign to pass.
Yeah, I mean, Denise and I'll just interject here. We call it the Sports Center version because she's a pretty quick thinker. It takes me a little while to verbalize. And the deal is, if I can't explain the first part of the idea, investment, company, whatever it is, in 22 seconds, right? That's the foundation that Sports Center was first built on. They got to get your attention in 22 seconds to get you to hook in for the next 22 minutes of that show minus commercials. Um, if I can't do it in 22 seconds, and now I know this about myself, it's probably not a good idea. Denise doesn't
Yes.
have to know anything about the industry I'm talking about, but if I can explain it to her, I'll use Galway Bay as another example. In 22 seconds, I was able to explain it's golf outerwear for people who love the game, who want to play in any weather. She's like,
Exactly.
I totally get that. She's not a passionate golfer. She likes it. She knows I'm passionate, and she's seen me come home from rainy, wet days bitching about the weather. It's pretty easy to get your mind wrapped around it. Now, obviously, now we're going to take the 22 minutes and probably the 2 hours and 22 minutes behind it. But I think that's a great thing. Talk to your significant other, your best friend, your mentor, your whoever. And if you can't explain it in a very succinct amount of time, it's probably just too complicated, right? And you see that in deals, I think probably the same. So I cut you off there, but in the spirit of
No,
who, not how, finding that
that was.
information, I think is great.
And is it? I want to make sure I get the name. Is it Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank? I think is it.
Yes.
Am I saying it?
Yep.
Yeah. He has the same thing. Like if you can't succinctly describe the investment in, I think it was like a minute or 30, right? Like that's probably telling you something, right? If you really can't summarize it and recap it really quickly and really succinctly that someone can understand it, it's probably a good thing to pass.
Yeah. So, folks, we're going to have a lot of these nuggets timestamped in the show notes. I know a lot of you listen on walks or in the car. So, there's so many to pull out of this, especially if you're thinking about doing this, or maybe you effed it up once or twice and you're gun shy about. I love the idea of having some liquidity, your rainy day money, your security money, which is most likely invested in the market itself, moves around, and your whole goal is not to look at it every day or hopefully not every month. And then you're going to have some at risk, some speculative money that, to Grant's point, I know you say it this way because I don't think about it this way, but are you okay with losing all of it? And I think for anybody, you go, maybe $100. Like, I don't know if there's really a number because I understand the value of what it takes to earn it, as do I think most people. But you're right. What chunk of money that won't change your life going forward and certainly won't diminish your retirement fund or whatever it is that would painfully keep you up at night? I love the way you said that. So when you think about those three buckets, make sure the first two are correct, because without that, I can tell you from experience, going to talk to a spouse, a true mentor, somebody who loves you and cares for you, you talking about something in the speculative bucket when the first two are not taken care of, it's a really bad idea. That's gambling. Okay, so hear that first and foremost. And Grant, I know you and I believe this to be true along with Brett. Those first two buckets have to be true. Like when we're working with partners, whether it's to growth capital or whatever it is, those are my questions. That do you have the other two things solid? And Tim, can I go talk to your wife Tracy about this? And she's going to be like, yeah, I'm fully up to speed and no. Because what I don't want to do is be sitting around having a glass of wine together or a cup of coffee, and we're talking about Galway Bay growth, and she's like, what do you mean you reinvested 50 grand? It's like, we shouldn't be there, right? So I love that you're saying, hey, make sure you get the first two buckets before you go to the third, and talk to somebody about it. Be really good takeaway. Hopefully I didn't cut you off too bad. And by the way, folks, Dan Sullivan's books, Who Not How, 10X, they're sitting right above my head here among many others. Dig in, be a student. I mean, going back to what Grant said, be a student of this. And thankfully with podcasts, with books on tape, there's kind of no excuse to not, stop the scroll for lack of a better thing and get your windshield MBA, right? Go get this information. Because my guess is if you played sports for 2, 3, 5, 8, 10 years, in theory, you've been out of the work market, you've been out of the education market, you need to get yourself up to speed. So make sure that you don't skip that point of continue that learning. And especially in this area, if it interests you, there's plenty of great resources and you can find them on our site. We're going to list them in the show notes, but they're all there. For sake of time, I do want to wrap this because I think you guys as an investment firm are really onto something, both with your sort of outline and strategy, where you are pointed in a direction. And I also think, again, your name is more than just a title of the company. When you guys think of legacy and I'd say not just for you and Brett, right, in the company, but when you also think about the legacy that your partners get to be a part of, what is it that you guys are hoping for? And I'm asking that because most of the people in our audience aren't thinking about their legacy portion yet because they haven't been on the journey long enough, right? So I think hearing from others who are like on this part of the journey, what does the legacy mean for you guys? And my guess is it's more than just a bunch of zeros in the benevolent bank account. So what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think sticking with our benevolent touchstone and foundation is one we want to do as well as we possibly can for all of our investors, right? Is ideally where if we're right about some of these investments, they can perhaps be in some ways life-changing type outcomes. And that's why we described that, the nature of our investment focus, we're not looking for something that just doubles. If it just doubles, we didn't make money. We're looking for 5, 10, 20x type returns, which is also why we're so hyper focused and curated. Maybe we do 2 to 4 deals a year because we're really looking for those rocket shots. And so that would be the first thing is we ideally want to do as well as possible for our investors. And then, more than that is with our own families. I have 2 young daughters. Brett's got 3 kids. One is what hopefully we can have from a longer term perspective. But also it's really nice for me. I have a 9-year-old daughter, and when we're around town where we live and we see like athletic brewing on the menu, she's well aware of like, hey, that we have an investment in that. And in some ways it's teaching her young, like what that means. And she understands. I've explained to her about, hey, well, someday perhaps it goes public, and what does it mean to be a public company? So now she's asking me like, when is it going public? But it's really cute, right? She's because so that's part of the legacy is right, family, friends, and ultimately a big part of, for me, what it's all about is this comes right out of the book, The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. But what it's really about is to do what you want with who you want, where you want, when you want, how you want, right? That's the real value of money, is to give you control over your time and the who's that you do stuff with. And that's a big part of it is, you and I discussed like perhaps some of the biggest mistakes that we've made from an investment perspective is actually being invested with somebody that we didn't actually genuinely enjoy spending time with. And again, as another filter or gut check, like, geez, it's really exciting, but I don't really enjoy having lunch with that guy, right? Like that's
Right.
telling you something. Pay attention to it. So I hope that helps to answer. But ultimately, the most we can do is the best we can with what we have, right? And then hopefully it's being paid forward. One of the things we try to do is mentor younger individuals. I have kids reach out to me all the time asking me about how I got my first job out of school and things like that. And in some ways, I'm always happy to tell them like, look, when I graduated from college, I didn't have a job, right? And at the time, it was awful, right? Not having a job, and a lot of my other friends did. But in hindsight, where I ended up at Montgomery Securities ended up being for all the best reasons, right? But you don't know that at that. So I say to kids all the time, like, look, don't worry, take a deep breath. You're going to find something. And when you do, hopefully it's going to be right for you. Or, by the way, sometimes knowing what you don't want to do is a blessing, right? You get that job and you realize, you know what? I really don't like this industry or this team, so to speak. I think I completely segued away from your original question.
No. I mean, I'm a visual guy, right? So what I'm drawing, and
Yeah.
this won't show up in the show notes because you don't want to read my chicken scratch, is
Yeah.
our legacy is also wrapping around advocacy and mentorship. And my word for that at the sort of culminating point is freedom, right? What you just mentioned, all of
Yes.
those things that we're investing for, and you and I both talked about this off camera. It does take money. So we're not going to hide that. Just like, hey, I'm looking for a high performing athlete to come work at my firm. I love that. Like, just call it out, man. Enterprise Rental Card, I was pretty bold about, we want NCAA athletes working for us. Shit, that's pretty cool. And look, money creates freedom of time. It creates the freedom of your relationships with people.
Yeah. Yes.
It creates the freedom of your resources. And ultimately, it creates your freedom and your purpose, right? To kind of paraphrase Dan Sullivan here. But I think as we all think about legacy, my takeaway from what you said, which is awesome, and again, success leaves clues. So listen to what Grant's saying here, is through that wheel of how will legacy look for me, don't deviate from the things that are already in your heart. Starting with investments, follow your heart, do things that you're passionate about, invest where you're passionate, care about what it is. And oddly enough, as those spin, your 9-year-old daughter will be wondering what the next company that goes public. And just by that question, what does that mean? A company going public? There's real world education happening that won't happen between the pages of a book, right? She's going to get that from her dad in this case. That's legacy, folks. So it's not all bowed up in, I hope 2 generations from now, everybody goes to college because I've afforded it. That's nice. Hopefully that's aspirational. That's great. But it's going to be the steps along the way. And Grant, I think you did a great job of saying, look, tie those things together. And at the end of the day, you're going to have a huge smile on your face when your daughter's, tugging on your shirt about, hey, we see it on the menu again and it might go public. I love that story. I think that's awesome. I want to give you sort of one last chance. I know we've really bounced kind of right through that whole thing about investing and all the way down to legacy. Any other nugget that you would leave? And I won't even say for young athletes, because I think, again, there's some people who may have played sport at a high level, gone on to do something else, and are ready for this what's next in their life, just some transition. But any other nugget that you've seen that's been really impactful for you, where through this step into kind of the unknown, I love that you said, I just took this job and I didn't even know I wanted it. And boy, it worked out great. One of my twin boys, Josh, is at that inflection point of, I'm afraid to make a move because I don't know if I want to be there. And the answer is, it doesn't matter. Go there and you might find out what you don't like, which is just as important. So if you were to leave everybody with kind of one thing, even if it's a summarized tip from before, what would you, what nugget do you drop on us?
Well, thanks. I think another dynamic that is important from an investment perspective is figure out how involved you're looking to be, right? Because if it's just that you want to write a check and get updates, then know that, right? Hey, I'm cool. I'm investing in you. I believe in you. Keep me posted. But if it's, hey, no, I'm writing a check and I want this to be part of an education, right? I want it to be a mini MBA. I want to be involved. Know that, first of all, explain that that's a big part of your money, your investment, and make sure that there's buy-in, right? Reciprocity. And to each their own, right? You may have, from an investment perspective, certain investments you make where it is more passive. Hey, just keep me updated and let me know how I can help. And others where you say, no, I'd really like to learn about this business. And if that's an opportunity that's available, and again, there's resonance and buy-in. Wonderful. But I think that's really important to know that early on, not say, oh, hey, I wrote you that check because I want to be involved. Like, well, wait a second, you didn't tell me that, right? Maybe that works. Maybe it doesn't work. I don't know. We do the same thing with our companies, Dan Sullivan, when they come to us, our investments, and they ask us like, hey, can you help us get a meeting with Costco as an example? Like we say, yeah, well, who do we know that can help you? Right. That's how we approach things. Who, not how. Who can we find?
Yep. Well, that's honestly, that probably is a great culminating point there, because without it, both parties lose. And I know it doesn't seem like it. If you're just stroking a check, you're like, well, how could someone lose? They got my money. If their interest is your check also comes with your followers or your input or your passion for their thing, and you don't show up with it, they're pretty bummed, right? If you're a Justin Rose and you're used to traveling around, and then you say, well, but I'm not going to use it, that's a bummer, just to pick on Justin, right? Or Justin Thomas with Grayson, right? What a great example. Our company in Detroit, right? Grayson Clothiers, picked a guy who loved wearing their gear, like awesome. And the flip side of that being is I kind of write this down, know your why. Like, why are you investing? And if it is to get more education and you share that, and someone's like, that would be awesome for us. And they might say, I just need your check. Better to know early than you're sitting around waiting for this investment MBA and it doesn't show up.
Have those conversations, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, hey, thank you so much for agreeing to say yes on very short notice. I know between travels and moving around, It's not easy. I'm glad I wasn't one of the no's, so thank you for saying yes.
A real pleasure.
Folks, yep. Please dive into this, and the books that are referenced again will be in the show notes. You're hearing these themes over and over and over again from multiple people from all different walks of life. This one happens to be one of our most requested topics of I'd like to invest, but I'm a little bit nervous, and how. Hopefully, between what Grant has shared today, Brett a couple of episodes ago, giving you just some insights as to what it looks when it's done right. And I can personally attest, this is what it looks like when it's done right. Again, not an investment advisor here, but I've seen a lot of what's wrong. Take this to heart. And as you think about kind of what your journey is going to be and where you're going to go, don't do it alone. You wouldn't be on a team alone. There's no such thing as team when you're alone. So don't go this journey alone. Tag in with others, reach out to us. We'll plug you in. Grant's just said, hey, you can, I know this, you can follow those guys at Benevolent Capital. Check them out on the website, check them out on social. We'll have the links to those. But Grant, thanks for being with us. And everybody else, thanks for being on this journey. As always, if you like us, hit the like button, subscribe. That's the way we keep in touch with you. We send you out other information and you get to request awesome guests like Grant Johnson and hear more. So thank you for joining us on the journey of what's next.